Hi, everyone. Welcome to Real Estate for All. My name is Miriam G. I'm with Co Everything. We're going to hear from Travis Lee about the face of development.
Hello, everybody. My name is Travis Lee. I am the founder and principal member of T. Lee Development. I am a Dorchester resident. I've lived in Fields Corner and the Ashmont Hill areas of Dorchester for about 15 years. T. Lee Development is a real estate development company based in Dorchester, where I live. I founded T. Lee Development about 7 years ago with the mission of developing mixed income and mixed use properties in the neighborhood that I lived in.
I wonder if you could just give us very broadly, what is a developer and what is it that developers do?
I think it's a fabulous question. The reason I think it's fabulous is because there were many years of my life where I heard people talk about real estate developers and I just did not know what it meant. I figured it had something to do with construction, something to do with money, something to do with building and selling or leasing or renting. But I think it's really helpful to have a very clear sense of what a traditional real estate developer does. There are a few parts to this thing called real estate development. And the real estate developer is a person who is managing a process. And the thing about a developer is that developers don't need to be experts at any one particular thing. In fact, most developers are not experts. Developers are usually not architects. They're usually not general contractors. They're usually not attorneys. They can be any of those professions, but they usually aren't. They're usually somebody who's good at managing a process and good at coordinating and facilitating people. You can just be someone who likes to connect people and who is good at making sure that Bob is talking with Susie. So here's the quick process that I want to go through. What is real estate development? It typically starts with a developer identifying either a community or a piece of property that is of interest to that developer. But working with the folks that live in the neighborhood is a very important part of determining what could I and what should I build there. Once there's a collective, more or less agreement on a kind of project, then there's the size of the project. Is it 2 stories, 3 stories, 4 stories, 5 stories? Is it 5 apartments, 10 apartments, 15 apartments? Is there commercial space or not? But once a specific vision is crafted, that developer would typically go to the seller and engage in a contract to buy the property. The contract may give the developer or 6 months or 9 months of an option to buy, at which point at the end is the actual purchase. And there's time set up to do some homework and to do some community process. Other sellers want their money immediately and say, look, I'll give you 30 days. So there's always negotiation that takes place between the developer trying to buy property and the seller trying to sell property. And once that architect and the developer have come up with a plan, we often call it a napkin sketch or a concept plan, then the developer might say to a contractor, listen, I'm thinking about building this. I have the property under contract, which means I can buy it if I want to, but I don't have to yet. How much do you think it's going to cost me to build this 4-story building with 25 apartments? Oh, you think it's going to cost me $8 million? Wow. I've told this seller that I'm willing to pay $1 million for it. And so you sit down and you crunch these numbers that we talked about before. Do you have enough sources of money to pay for the cost of the project? And the developer starts to sit down and crunch numbers to figure out, can I pay the $1 million that I told the seller that I would pay? So it is the developer's job to coordinate all of the professionals. Most of the time, the developer is the person taking the risk. If the project gets into construction and falls apart, it's usually the developer who's going to pay the price to the banks, to the investors. One of the key things to understand about this developer role is that it's most often that person who assumes all the risk for the getting to construction process, completing the construction process, and then selling or renting all of the apartments or the small business space. All of that risk falls on the developer. And for all of those people who have made lots of money in real estate development, you probably haven't heard about the many folks who have lost their shirts because they put the whole piggy bank on a construction or real estate project that fell apart at the seams.
Sometimes when you see the face of development, like it could be Miriam G, it could be Travis Lee, whoever is the face of the development is not actually the person who has all the money in the pot. There's all these other players behind the scenes who have their money that's been invested in the project, and each of those has rules attached to the way that they want their money to come back to them in the future.
There's a perception out there that people who are developing projects that are the face of a project, that they're the ones bankrolling all of these projects, and that all of this money comes back to them very quickly. I think it's important that we bust that bubble in some regard so that people understand how it most often works. And you're absolutely right. There's usually a person who is the developer, and that's the person who is engaging the team, who's engaged the architect, engaged the contractor, and has built an idea, a vision, a project, and has taken that project or that idea to the community and said, hey, here's what maybe I have been thinking. What do you think about this? Or maybe even a smart developer will start by going to the community. What is it that you all think would be a valuable creation in your neighborhood? Look, I noticed there's 2 or 3 vacant lots. They're for sale. I'm looking at this one or that one. What is it that the community thinks they need or want? And maybe you hear the community say, we'd like some home ownership housing, or we'd like some affordable rental housing. And so maybe a smart developer would say, okay, I can either do that or I cannot. And sometimes the developer says, I can, I know how to do that. I can build home ownership housing. I know how to build affordable housing. And so maybe that developer will go off to the seller of that property and say, hello, Mr. Seller, I'll offer you X amount for that property. And maybe the seller says, okay. And maybe the developer says, but I can't pay you yet because I want to put some things together and take it back to the community to make sure they like the direction I'm heading before I actually buy this. And a smart developer will do that so that the developer doesn't get cornered in a meeting with the community where the developer says, look, I have to build this because I've already bought this. The idea is to not be cornered and to be able to say with some integrity to the community, listen, I've heard you say this is an interesting idea. I've taken that idea. I have found some property in your neighborhood. And here's an idea, specific vision for your idea, that this is how it looks on paper. This is about how tall it will be. This is about how much the rents will be. And I can buy this. I've talked to the owner, will sell it to me for an amount of money that fits in with the project economics. So if you all like this, I'll proceed and buy it and move forward. If you don't like it, let's talk about why. Maybe we can adjust it. And if we can, we'll move forward with the adjustments. And if you think this is a terrible idea for whatever reason, we can walk away and I cannot buy it. And we can say, let's take a look at something else in the future.
Thanks, Travis, for your time. We'll catch you in the next video.